What if your biggest burnout was actually your soul whispering, "This isn't it"? In today's episode of the Manifestation of Money podcast, I'm joined by leadership mentor and author James Robbins. James helps us unravel what it really means to build a life in alignment, not just on paper, but in your heart. This conversation sparked an aha moment for me, and I hope it'll do the same for you. Welcome to the Manifestation and Money podcast, the show where we tackle the taboo topics of money and manifestation. I'm your host, Jenni Schultz, former 9-to-5 grinder who ditched the status quo and went all in on creating a life I love. Yes, I use manifestation. Yes, I took action. And yes, I created a 7-figure net worth before turning 40. Every week, I'll bring you inspiring stories with money mavens and manifestation masters. From learning how to make more, save more, and grow your wealth to unlocking the power of manifesting your dream life. I am so excited to play in this space with you. Let's jump into creating a life you love. Welcome to the Manifestation and Money podcast, James.
Jen, thanks for having me on your show.
I am pumped to have you on the show today, and I would love for you to share with the listeners just who James is and what your story is.
Well, I grew up on a small cattle ranch in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. I was like this redheaded, shy kid. I was the only redhead in my entire town, and grew up with all these insecurities and then launched off into the big, bad world and found my way through a couple of different careers, created a leadership development company, and have written a couple of books. The most recent is The Call to Climb, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, that is the one that definitely piqued my interest when I came across you. And I know that's the one the listeners that listen to the show are totally going to resonate with that story. So we'll dig into that. What was the spark for you that drew you to creating this book?
This goes back to when I was in my mid 30s. I was working in a career that everyone was like, hey, you've got like this dream job. Like, you're so lucky to have this job. And I would say yes to that. But then inwardly, I actually wasn't happy. And I felt guilty for that. I felt guilty for not being happy of having the job that everybody had wanted, at least in my circle. But I just figured I'm the problem. So I just kept marching onward and doing the job. And I was good at it. Eventually, that catches up to you when you are living out of alignment with your inner life, whether you want to call that your soul, your psyche, or your consciousness. Basically, that's what was going on. Is I was living in a role that wasn't meant for me at the time. Yet at the same time, I didn't want to leave. It's not that I didn't want to leave. I didn't know how to leave. And I was honestly scared to make a big shift like that.
Isn't that a valid point to make right there? We can be good at something, but that doesn't mean we have to like it, or that doesn't mean we have to do it. We're allowed to pivot from that point. What was the catalyst or that twisting point for you to switch into something else?
I would love to say that I just had this light bulb moment and I made this bold leap, but I didn't. I just kept trucking on. I started a side hustle at the same time, and that helped some of my creative outflow. And then eventually the side hustle was making more than I was making in that job. And eventually I finally made the transition out. But even then, even with the income being replaced, there was still all these fears about what's the tribe around me going to think. And there was a certain status you get in some careers that, okay, that's going to be gone. And so it's wrestling with that. It's never just about money when we've got a big decision in front of us. And of course, we want to mitigate risk. But for me, yeah, there was a lot of things. We always lose something when we make a change. But at the same time, we always gain something.
As human beings, why do we grip onto the worry of the fear of what other people think? Like, it's our life. Why are we so fixated on, oh, I'm worried. I want to make this big, bold move, but I'm worried about my peers, or I'm worried about what my parents are think. Why?
Yeah, those patterns run deep, right? Like right from the beginning. And I I'll still struggle with some of those things even to this day. But one of the things that showed me how strong patterns were was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I started journaling, and there was this app that came out. And so I would journal on my computer, and I actually stuck with it. Like, I stuck with it. And then 10 years later, like thousands of entries. And the app that I journaled on, it launched a new feature where when you logged in, it would say, hey, you've got 7 other entries on this day in previous years. Do you want to read them? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, that would be cool. So I would start to read what was happening on this day, 2 years, 4 years, 8 years ago. But then what happened was I started reading these entries and I was like, wait a minute, that sounds just like what I wrote today. That's eerily similar. Like the same challenges, the same struggles, the same frustrations, the same fears, the same questions unanswered. And some of the entries were so the same that I would copy and paste them and send them to my friends and say, like, hey, check this out. This is really weird. And then as I got even looking more into this, I mean, it wasn't just struggles or fears that were the same. Sometimes it was like the same things happening. Like this was so bizarre. I'm in a hospital in Costa Rica, and that night I go to type in my journal to discover that a year ago on the same day, I was in a hospital in Madrid, Spain for stomach pain. I went to this one day, I couldn't get over this flu. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to a minute clinic, walk in. And so I walk into this CVS Minute Clinic, and the nurse practitioner, I'm telling her all my symptoms. She opens up my file. Then she goes, hold on, you were already in here today. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. She's like, yes, you were at our beaches location. And I'm like, trust me, I've been at home all day. I've not been out. Then she goes, wait a minute. She goes, oh, this is so weird. You were in exactly 1 year ago today, and your symptoms are exactly the same. She goes, I'm just going to copy and paste what was there and put them into today's file. And it was like this Twilight Zone moment where I thought, I am living a copy and paste life. Like there's these repetitive loops. Now, those are really bizarre ones, right? But there's these repetitive loops that I was just going in again and again and again, but I would have never known because it's like the orbit is so big that I didn't recognize when I had come back to it. And I mean, I don't believe we're living in a matrix, but if there's anything that's going to make me think possibly it was my journal entries. But what that showed me, this goes back to your comment about how we're still so concerned about what people think of us, is because those programs that are within us, they create a sort of guardrails for how we're going to live our life. And how we have been living is often how we're going to be living. And that was what scared me with my journal, is I realized my last 5 years have mostly been the same. Even though I'm someone who's really focused on growing, yet I'm still in this same place, it feels, which means in 5 years, my life is going to look exactly like this again, unless I do something different. And that really woke me up to the idea that you have to be intentional about overcoming the patterns of fear in your life.
Yeah, there's that word that I love so much, intentional. For you, what did being intentional look like once you had that aha? Because that's pretty crazy to be literally sitting in hospital rooms or doctor's offices on mirroring days in different years. That's the universe saying, okay, James, we're giving you signs here. Something is not working. If you keep winding up here, it's up to you to pivot into something. So what was the intentional pivot for you?
So the intentional pivot was really about, well, number one, it's not that I wasn't clear about what I wanted, but one of the steps in the process that I really missed out on back then was understanding what version of James actually attracts that life, right? So if you think about it, like all of us listening, there's probably things you want, things that you want to accomplish, things that you would like to have, a ranch in the mountains or something like that. Well, if you think about it this way, there's always some kind of elevated life we want. But that elevated life, it's almost like it's not accessible to us right now. What's accessible to us right now is the actual current life that we're living in. And if we want an elevated life, there's an elevated version of us that actually gets that life. And so the focus for me shifted from what am I trying to get, vision boards and all this stuff, to what version of James actually creates that life or that life is attracted to. And the focus then began on becoming that person. And then that's where I began to notice all the places of resistance, all the fears, all the anxieties, right? Instead of like me thinking, okay, I got to make this much money. Now it's, no, I've got to be this kind of person, even in setbacks. I can't be the old version of me. I've got to be that next version of me. And that, to me, that's the work. That's the real work. Having that intention in the morning, revisiting it at the end of the day, going, where did I break from the plan? And then realize like, oh, I was supposed to do sales calls and that I didn't. I started tinkering on my website. But why did you do that, James? Because I don't like being rejected. And that's why I hate doing sales calls, right? So when you can get to this place of non-judgment, where you can just truly look at your life and how you're acting and seeing your fears, then you can start making a plan to take a different path than the one you naturally take.
Mm-hmm. So you're trying to embody that, the way of being for that new person that you're trying to attract. Like you talking about that made me think of a person who is like, yeah, I want this dream property, yet their credit is in the garbage can because they can't pay their monthly credit card bill. So by starting to embody making those monthly payments, getting yourself out of that bad credit rap, then you're getting yourself in alignment with that person that can go out and get that dream property. It's kind of like that, right?
Exactly. And, this works on two levels. So I know you talk about manifestation on your show. And of course, that's definitely a part of this. And when you want to look at the neuroscience side of this, is that when we are stepping into that version of us and we're clear of what we want, but we're stepping into that feeling, right? As if we've already got it. Well, what we're doing also is we're priming the brain. So if you think we're priming the brain of what to notice. So we're all familiar with the algorithm in social media, right? It's to our frustration, right? Like, why are my posts not getting shown? Or if I go on anyone else's social media, I can sort of tell what they've been looking at, right? Because it's in the algorithm. That's exactly how the brain works. Once we let the default mode network know that this is what's important, think of it like the bouncer at the nightclub. It only lets in what's important and what's attractive, right? That's the bouncer's job. Well, that part of our brain, there's a bouncer there, and we signal to the bouncer, only let this information in. Because I can't remember how many, it's like millions of bits of data that come at us every second, but we can really only process like 80 bits. So imagine seeing like there's 40 million things in front of you, and your brain is going to go, okay, right, only 100 of those we're going to let in. That's this tiny sliver of the world that's going to get let in. And so we have to decide, what are we going to let in? And if we're always looking at what's wrong, then more of that's going to come in. If we're always thinking like, yeah, this always happens to me, or I can't catch a break, or I always have friends that are not there for me, well, when we start to program the algorithm like that, then we're just going to get more of it. Again, that's a brain thing. So let's have the brain work for us by believing that we've already got these things because we're acting like the person that has it, and then we will have a completely different reality.
That's a really great visual there because everybody, like you said, in today's world, the Facebook algorithms or the social media algorithms, we see that, right? And my husband will say stuff like, is this showing up in your feed? It's showing up in my feed all the time. And I'm like, no, like weird, but that's because that's not the stuff that I'm interested in. So therefore it doesn't show up for me. So people can definitely take that visual and put it into real life.
And you think about even now, like this is actually a hot topic about in a sense, the politicization of our nation, right? And a lot of it's through social media. So what you're going to see more of, you're going to see more of. Like, I'm not a TikTok user. Like, we created a TikTok account. We thought, oh, maybe we'll experiment with some content. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I saw a video of this guy's prepare for the nuclear war, or prepare for the end. And I'm like, where's this guy getting this? But I spent enough time on his video that the next video was about being a prepper, and the next video was about Russia and China. And all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm like fearful that there's going to be a nuclear strike. And I'm like, it's only because that's whatever algorithm came to me was that. And yeah, our brain is completely like that. And that's why, back to the old example, when you want to buy a certain car, let's say you want to buy a Tesla, you just begin to see them everywhere. But nothing in reality changed. But your reality changed in terms of what your brain said, okay, let's let this in. You could almost imagine it like, let's say, a Shakira concert, or Taylor Swift concert, and you see 100,000 people, and your brain is going to say, okay, we can only let in one person's scarf. So choose from the 100,000. Like, the brain has filtered out so much data that you don't get to see because it thinks this is what you need. So let's work with that. Let's work with that and have that go in our favor. And I believe that's why we begin to see synchronicities and things like that.
Yeah, my brain is going off track here for a second because yes, that's so important for us to do to keep that focus and that attention on what we want. But you've brought in a whole different element here that I hadn't even considered before of those algorithms, how we are literally being force fed things that we're not even wanting to think about. So we have that element in this day and age on top of trying to keep our own focus on that. How do you suggest people, like with that added layer now, be able to keep that intentionality towards what they want?
So part of it is really getting clear on what it is that you want and what are your commitments. I break my life down like that. What are my commitments? So I have these 7 commitments in my life, right? One commitment's about health, but I have reasons for the commitment. One commitment is about really honoring my path to be soul aligned. I'm going to be committed to that. Another commitment is to create wealth, right? So that I can help my children, I can help other people, I can enjoy freedom. So I have these areas where like I have these commitments, and now it's about I need to keep these commitments. At the beginning of the day, I can review my commitments, and at the end of the day, I can just ask myself, how did that go? Right? In a real non-judgmental way. And then that's where we learn, that's when we learn, wait a minute, what is going against the internal programming that's not that? For example, my commitment to health is not really a problem keeping it. For whatever reason, I stay healthy and all of that. Now, being true to my soul, that's a different challenge because even let's say today, I posted something online that was a bit further out of my would say lines or comfort zone. And I even hesitated, should I post this? I don't know how this is going to go over. But I posted it, so I did the right thing. But at the end of the day, I can take a look at that to just to go, you ran into that anxiety. So I did the right thing. I kept my commitment. But why did I have that anxiety? Again, it comes back to I'm caring what people think. I'm caring what people think who don't even know me or will never attend my funeral, right? So then, okay, I can chew on that for a minute. All right, good, Jamie. You made the right decision. You kept your commitment. And so that's the thing is you want to outline what are your commitments and then let's keep them. At least that's how I do it.
I love that. What is soul alignment for you, and how do you connect with that?
To me, being aligned with your soul, first of all, I believe that all of us are here for a reason, that all of us are more than a bunch of cells and neurons. I believe we're more than a brain, and there's just some great research that backs that up actually, that we are beings that are here in this physical world having this experience. And at the same time, there's clues that like you are an astronomical miracle. It's like 1 in 400 trillion chance that you even were born. Right away, that puts even the Powerball lotto odds to shame, right? It's 1 in 400 trillion that you're even here. And then explain to me why every single person has a different set of fingerprints. Even identical twins don't have the same fingerprints. Why is that? Obviously, there's a physical explanation of that. But to me, we use that as an identifier, right? Your fingerprints, and that's how we catch you at the crime because only Jen has this fingerprint. I mean, think about that. Like you are a once in a cosmos event and unrepeatable. Like you're an unrepeatable event. So, with all that uniqueness, isn't there something for us to do? And I really believe that our purpose, right? We're all searching for what's my purpose in life. I don't think your purpose is this one thing, sort of like a soulmate, like who's my soulmate? You know, that thinking, I believe, boxes you in to think there's just one person out there who's perfect for you. I think there's probably a lot of people you can have a great relationship with and feel totally in love with. When it comes to your purpose, I believe your purpose is to bring the most authentic and honest version of yourself to the world. Now, what you do, I think there's probably 1,000 things you could do that are in alignment with that, but it's getting in touch with truly your soul, what excites you, what brings you alive, what brought you alive as a kid. Looking back to what was one of the best days of your childhood that you can remember, and then what were you doing and why is it still in your memory? Because there's all these breadcrumbs along the way. So what happens to us, and this happened to me, is you get into something because we've also got the programming and the tribal expectations and the ego. And then that creates another path. And we get so far down that path, we think, well, I can't make a change now. But the soul shows up at some point to start knocking and tugging and nudging you that, hey, there's something bigger for you. There's something more for you. And for me, it took a long time to really trust that. And I think that the soul is a little bit like, it's like the seed to an oak tree, right? This, if you ask the seed of an oak tree, like, what do you want to do with your life? It's like, well, I'm becoming what I am. I'm becoming an oak tree. Do you care what anyone thinks? No, I'm going to I'm going to express what I am in the world. Now, I know I'll do a lot of things as an oak tree. I'll provide shade, I'll stop erosion, I'll create homes for animals, but that's actually not even the goal. The goal is who I'm becoming an oak tree. And I think you and I and everyone listening, we're like that. There's there's a song for you to sing, there's something for you to express. And that is truly what it means to live in soul alignment, is getting in touch with that. And the challenge I've found is throughout my life, there's a lot of things I thought were like soul aligned, but as I looked deeper, it was actually just goals of the ego. And I'll give you one example, and this actually shows up in the book, even though it's a fable, but this is true from my life. So I used to have this goal stone. Actually, I still have it. It was this stone, and I engraved $1 million on it. I bought an engraver on Amazon, and I scratched out one. And then I carried this stone with me for 2 years, every day, because the idea was like, this is my goal, this is my goal, this is my goal. But then, you know what? I wasn't getting any closer to this goal. And pretty soon it started to just be frustrating, like a joke in my pocket. And then one day I just asked myself the question, why do you want $1 million? Apart from, of course, that will give you many things, but why do you want it? What will that do for you? How will that make you feel? And I was quiet enough that the answer came, and it said that because then I'll feel successful, which meant that I didn't feel successful in the moment. And with that, there was a certain amount of shame. And then it hit me that the reason I want this goal was to erase my shame. So you can see how almost like the soul would work against that goal. Because if I wanted to get rid of my shame, I don't need $1 million to do that. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And I think that's the perfect segue here for you to lean in and tell the listeners about your new book and what they can experience by reading it.
So the call to climb literally came out of my own crash and burn in the 30s when I was in my mid 30s. But the call to climb is basically a fable about this person who stumbles into a remote village in the Bolivian Andes because they have a car breakdown, only to find out that this village has been expecting them because it's sort of a mystical place where there's this big mountain that calls people to climb when they are out of alignment with their soul. And the reason it calls them is so that they actually might have a conversation with their soul, a conversation that the soul has been wanting to have in your life for a long time, but you've been ignoring the appointment because you're busy, because life is fast, because there's so much going on that you don't have time to stop. Well, in this magical place, when you're called to climb, you almost are forced to sit down and hear what the soul has been wanting to tell you for a long time. And so the story is about this person named Riley, and they end up climbing this mountain and find out all the ways that they've been out of sync and how do they reclaim their life? How do they find their path, conquer their fears, and how do they fulfill their true destiny? That's what the book's about. It was really fun to write. Definitely came out of my own story for sure.
I love that. And I'll be sure to drop the link in the show notes to the book so people can grab a copy of that. And before I go, I would love for you to share what your biggest piece of advice would be for someone to go and just create a life that they love.
Well, one thing I would say is to remember this. You know, I've been to a lot of funerals in my life, and the funerals, at least in the West, have a certain formula to them. Somebody, and this will probably be true for all of us, right? When it's your funeral, someone's going to get up and they're going to read your eulogy. And your eulogy is a list of all the things that you accomplished. And it takes about 2 minutes. And the rest of the hour is spent with people that love you, that get up and talk about what you meant to them. And if that's sort of our final curtain call on this planet, shouldn't that give us some idea and understanding into what really is important. And it's the impact that we have on those around us. And the best way you can impact someone is to really bring your authentic self to this world. That's your gift to the world, and it's also your gift to yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very grounding way to end this episode today. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today, James.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you for hanging out with me on the Manifestation and Money podcast. If you're ready to take your manifesting to the next level, come join me inside the Manifestation Playground. It's an intentional space I've created to explore, experiment, and expand your manifestation potential. It's where the magic happens. So head on over to www.manifestationplayground.ca to find out more. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep taking aligned action. Cheers to creating a life you love.